Now, the Premier League says it is fighting a rise in social media threats against both players and their families.
Yeah, so the Premier League has now set up a unit dedicated to hunting down those online trolls who target top-flight footballers. And the BBC's disinformation and social media correspondent, Marianna has been talking to one player who has been targeted and to the people tasked with tracking down those online haters.
And we're just about ready to go.
June 2020, and Brighton are taking on Arsenal. Striker Neil Maupay collides with Arsenal's goalkeeper. Later, he scores the winner.
Brighton have won it with seconds to play!
But after the game, Maupay, who now plays for Brentford, became the target of hate and these particularly threatening messages.
It was very disturbing, because I received one saying basically, I know where you live, I will come to your house tonight and I'm gonna kill you and your family. I called the club and I said, listen, we need to do something, because what if that guy is really coming down to my house? I reported it to the club with the screenshot and everything. I reported it on Instagram as well. And then the club sent it over to the Premier League.
So this is the trophy.
I headed to meet the Premier League team tasked with investigating his case.
We're dealing with really nasty abuse where ultimately it could be considered criminal. So we are not removing people's general thoughts or comments on a particular player or on a match or on the league itself. We're dealing with the stuff that's really horrible and shouldn't have any place online.
The team used to just deal with piracy. Now it uses the same techniques to investigate abusive posts and messages on social media.
We see family members getting as much abuse, sadly, as the players do, and they can report to us to then investigate the direct messages that have been sent to them. Sometimes more abuse is sent to them than the players themselves. It might be that the profiles are open or they're easy to find, they're tagged in a particular photo, whatever the reason may be.
And we are playing a game, it's not that deep. I think it's hard to punish everyone, but the more we can do it, I think the better it is, because it will show people that this is not okay and you'll get in trouble for it.
So is accountability for the people who troll the way to stop this behaviour online? Well, for footballers and others targeted with hate, the abuse still rages on.
Marianna is here on the sofa with us this morning. Hiya. Football's got a real problem, hasn't it, with this kind of thing?
It does, and whenever you're watching a game, if there's a red card, if there's a penalty, if there's a last-minute winner, you expect that player to, in some way, be subject to online hate. But I think one of the things that's shocked me investigating this case and speaking to this kind of Premier League troll-busting team is the way that anyone connected to a player becomes fair game. Family, friends, people tagged in photos, and that they're dealing with that as well as match officials, as well as other people connected to the sport. And when we talk about hate here, we're talking about threats, racism, in terms of the women's game, harassment, misogyny. We're not just talking about someone saying, oh, actually, you didn't play very well.
And it can be feisty enough on the terraces, can't it, when you go to a game, but actually hiding behind a phone, people are even meaner.
Totally, and I think one of the things as well that's quite shocking is the way, the volume of abuse that seems to come not from here in the UK, but actually from overseas. Speaking to this team, it was set up back in 2019, and they found that 80% of the abuse tends to come from people who are not here in the UK at all. And if you think, they couldn't really hurl abuse at the players if they weren't at the games or weren't here 20, 30 years ago. Now, whenever you want, you can send emojis, messages, comments. And I've messaged quite a few of the trolls, the people who've sent these kinds of messages. And on the whole, they basically say, well, it's a bit of an outlet. Almost like it doesn't really matter, like it's not real.
It's not a real person.
Yeah, but it is
banter.
real.
That's how people often see it, isn't it?
Yeah, and the problem is that it is real. And I think particularly when we're talking about threats here, people who are worried about their family's safety, speaking to Neil Maupay, the concerns that you think about, is this someone who knows where I live, who's going to come and find me, target my family? And I'm someone who in a very different way experiences hate and trolling for what I do. And that's something that crosses your mind all the time. You're thinking about your safety, you're thinking about what this means and whether someone will actually take action on what they're saying.
So if a footballer, say, gets abuse from an account abroad or from an anonymous account, so there's no name on it, how does this troll-busting unit at the Premier League find them or try to correct it?
So this team actually uses a lot of the same techniques that they were using to track down accounts that were illegally sharing clips of matches online. to identify who's behind the accounts. So you're able to look for certain clues, even if someone hasn't actually given their name. Often they'll give away their location. You look at linked accounts, you can see who they've been interacting with, all the kind of clues that I use basically to investigate trolls and figure out who they are and where they are. And then what this team can do is either try and report content they think is in breach of social media sites' guidelines so they can take it down, or they can actually compile a dossier of evidence that they then share with the authorities, either here in the UK or abroad, and that's how the troll can be prosecuted. So in Neil Maupay's case, that happened. It was a 19-year-old called Derek Ng Daren, who was in Singapore, who'd actually been watching the game at his grandmother's house when he sent these messages. And during the course of this podcast, I actually got in touch with him through his lawyer, and essentially he said, yeah, I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry. I want to move on now. I shared that with Neil, who said, I'm ready to move on now too. But, you know, this is just one person who's been held accountable. There are so many more comments. If you just go and look at any footballer's social media page, you'll find that.
It's the volume as well, as the volume of them. And what is the advice for players who have to go out, you know, every week in front of thousands of people to do their job? What do the Premier League tell them to do? Look at it? Don't look at it? Report it? You know, what is it?
It's really interesting because one of the things that I find when I'm thinking about online abuse is how much you feel like I need to go through my own abuse to make sure it's all going to be OK, that I haven't missed anything. And that was something that Neil Maupay echoed when I chatted to him. So I think that certainly having this team that exists, I guess, offers a degree of reassurance. There are people who will look at these messages. But, you know, nonetheless, it continues and you're exposed to it all the time. And, you know, we're talking about footballers here, but actually in some ways this is emblematic of something that's happening to all kinds of people. And they don't have troll-busting teams to look for their trolls, and they don't have people to help them in that way. And so I think it's really important that anyone who experiences online abuse is able to speak up about it. They can get in touch with us. They can get in touch with, you know, someone who might be able to help them to figure out who's doing this and why, because it's really hard sometimes when you're just on your phone getting this kind of stuff all by yourself.
And it's one thing if you are the person in the public eye, but for the families, the friends getting it, they didn't buy into that, did they, at all?
No, I think that's really hard.
Marianna, thank you so much and happy birthday. It's lovely to have you here today. You can hear more on this by listening to Marianna's podcast. You just mentioned it. It's called Why Do You Hate Me? It's a really good listen. It's on BBC Sounds right now, and there's a visualised version as well on the BBC iPlayer.